Have you ever met one of them? They are a strange and often maddening species in our modern world of instant answers and collective solutions. You offer them help, a shortcut, a simple explanation, and they meet your offer not with gratitude, but with a quiet and often firm resistance. You see them wrestling with a problem, a piece of furniture with cryptic instructions, a complex software issue, a difficult intellectual puzzle, and instead of simply Googling the answer, like any sane and efficient person would, they seem to almost relish the struggle. They will spend hours in a state of deep, focused, and often frustrating concentration, their brow furrowed, their mind completely absorbed in a slow and solitary dance with the unknown. They are the people who like to figure things out on their own. You have likely looked at this person with a sense of profound and disorienting confusion. You see their refusal of help as a sign of their arrogance, of their stubbornness, of a deep and pathological need to prove their own self-sufficiency. You, a citizen of a culture that has elevated convenience, collaboration, and the outsourcing of our own minds to the level of a sacred duty, cannot comprehend their love of the difficult path. It feels like a failure of efficiency, a quiet and pointless form of self-flagellation. But what if you are wrong? What if their love of the struggle is not a sign of their arrogance, but of a profound and terrifying form of psychological strength? What if their refusal of your help is not a rejection of you, but a sacred and non-negotiable defense of their own inner process? What if they are not the ones who are inefficient, but are in fact the only ones who are truly learning anything at all? The brutal and uncomfortable truth is that the person who likes to figure things out on their own is not a Luddite or a masochist. They are a quiet and courageous rebel. Their struggle is not a sign of their incompetence. It is the sacred and necessary ritual of a sovereign mind. And in their quiet, stubborn, and deeply misunderstood obsession with the process lies a secret and powerful teaching for us all, a forgotten map that leads out of the shallow, frictionless, and deeply impotent world of the instantly gratified mind. The primal wound, the flight from helplessness. To understand the psychology of the person who must figure things out on their own, we must first understand that this is not a monolithic category. This is a vast and complex landscape of the human soul, and it is populated by many different kinds of inhabitants. And for many, the roots of this fierce independence lie in a deep and primal wound. This is the person whose childhood was a classroom in the harsh and unforgiving subject of radical self-reliance. They are the child who grew up in an environment where help was not available, or where the act of asking for it was a source of shame, of ridicule, or of profound and terrifying danger. They are the child of the neglectful parent, who learned from 1,000 silent moments that their problems were their own, that no one was coming to save them. They are the child of the critical and demanding parent for whom any admission of not knowing was a catastrophic failure, a confirmation of their own inadequacy. They are the child of the chaotic and untrustworthy parent who learned that the help of the adult world was often more dangerous and more painful than the struggle itself. For this child, the state of not knowing is not a neutral, cognitive state. It is a state of profound and terrifying helplessness. It is a reenactment of their original primal wound. The frantic and often desperate need to figure it out on their own is not a choice. It is a trauma response. It is a profound and deeply ingrained act of self-protection. It is a silent, unconscious vow. I will never be that helpless, that powerless, that dependent on another person ever again. As an adult, this person's fierce independence is a fortress. Their refusal of your help is not a rejection of you, it is a rejection of their own terrifying and deeply buried vulnerability. To accept your help would be to admit that they have a need, that they are not a perfect and self-contained island. And for a person whose entire psychological architecture is built on the foundation of a ruthless and absolute self-sufficiency, that admission feels like annihilation. Their struggle is not a joyful exploration, it is a grim and solitary battle for their own psychological survival. They are not trying to solve a problem, they are trying with all their might to keep the ghosts of their own past at bay. But there is another kind of person who likes to figure things out on their own, a person whose motivation comes not from a wound, but from a profound and terrifying strength. This is the person who is not afraid of the struggle, but who, in a very real sense, is in love with it. This is the independent mind, the free spirit, the person who has looked at the modern world's obsession with the easy, the convenient, and the frictionless, and has seen it not as progress, but as a form of profound and decadent sickness. This is the psychological warrior, in the sense that the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche would understand. For Nietzsche, the fundamental driving force of all noble and life-affirming existence is the will to power. This is not a brutish desire for domination, but a deep, instinctual urge to overcome resistance, to grow, to expand one's own sphere of competence, to become more than one is. For this kind of soul, a life without struggle, a life of easy and effortless success, is not a blessing. It is a curse. It is a form of living death. It is the resistance, the difficulty, the struggle that is the very source of all strength, all wisdom, and all genuine, hard-won joy. The person who embodies this psychology is not trying to get to the answer. They are in love with the process of getting to the answer. The answer, the solution, is almost an afterthought, a slightly disappointing end to a beautiful and thrilling battle. The true prize is the struggle itself. It is in the moment of confusion, of frustration, of being utterly and completely lost that they feel most alive. For it is in this moment that they are forced to summon all of their own internal resources, their creativity, their resilience, their courage, their will. The struggle is an alchemical furnace, and they have willingly stepped into it, knowing that it is the only place where the lead of their own ignorance can be transmuted into the gold of their own hard-won mastery. To offer this person the answer, to give them the shortcut, is not to do them a favor. It is to commit an act of profound and almost violent disrespect. It is to rob them of their battle. It is to deny them the sacred and exhilarating experience of their own self-overcoming. Their refusal of your help is not a sign of their arrogance. It is a sign of their profound and uncompromising self-respect. It is the quiet and powerful statement of a person who would rather fail on their own terms than to succeed on anyone else's. They are not interested in the cheap, borrowed, and ultimately hollow knowledge of the answer. They are interested in the indestructible and infinitely more valuable wisdom that can only be forged in the fires of their own solitary struggle. The Jungian alchemist, the process as a path to the self. Between the wounded survivor and the Nietzschean warrior lies a third, and perhaps the most psychologically profound type of the person who likes to figure things out on their own. The person who is engaged in the deep, alchemical work of their own individuation, the term the great psychologist Carl Jung used for the journey of becoming a whole and integrated self. For the Jungian alchemist, the problem to be solved is never just a problem. It is a symbol. It is a mirror. It is a small, concrete, and manageable piece of the external world that has become a vessel for a deep and unconscious internal process. The struggle to assemble the piece of furniture is not just a struggle with wood and screws, it is a struggle with the forces of chaos and order within their own psyche. The struggle to solve the intellectual puzzle is not just a struggle with ideas, It is a struggle to bring a new and more complex form of consciousness into being. This person's refusal of help is not just about independence, it is about the protection of a sacred and deeply personal alchemical process. To be given the answer from the outside would be to abort this process. It would be to solve the external problem while leaving the internal, and far more important, transformation incomplete. The process of figuring it out is a form of active meditation. It is a journey into the labyrinth of the unknown. And on this journey, the person is not just using their rational, conscious mind, their ego. They are forced to call upon all the other, deeper, and often neglected parts of their psyche. They must listen to their intuition, that quiet, non-linear whisper from the unconscious. They must summon their patience, their resilience, their feminine capacity to wait, to be receptive, to allow the answer to emerge in its own time. They must engage with their shadow, with the part of them that feels stupid, that feels incompetent, that wants to give up in a fit of rage. The struggle is a microcosm of the entire journey of individuation. It is the process of the conscious ego learning to let go of its own arrogant desire for control and to enter into a new and more humble partnership with the vast, mysterious, and infinitely wise intelligence of the self, the totality of the psyche. The moment of aha, the moment when the solution finally and often unexpectedly appears, is not just a moment of cognitive insight. It is a moment of spiritual grace. It is the moment when the alchemical work is complete, when a new and more integrated form of the self has been born. The person has not just solved a problem, they have, in a very real and profound sense, solved a piece of themselves. Their joy is not the shallow pride of the ego, it is the deep, quiet, and resonant joy of a soul that has become a little more whole, a little more conscious, a little more itself. Their love of the struggle is the love of the caterpillar for the chrysalis. They know on a deep and instinctual level that it is only in this dark, solitary, and often agonizing process that their own wings can be grown. The path of the sovereign mind, the choice before the modern soul. What then can we learn from these quiet and stubborn figures, these people who insist on figuring things out on their own? They are not just psychological curiosities. They are a mirror. They are a profound and uncomfortable reflection of the deep and often desperate intellectual and spiritual poverty of our own culture. They show us how addicted we have become to the cheap, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying drug of the easy answer. They show us how much we have come to fear the sacred and transformative power of our own solitary struggle. The path of the person who figures things out on their own, whether it is born of a wound, of a strength, or of a profound alchemical wisdom, is the path of the sovereign mind. It is the path of the person who has, for whatever reason, refused to outsource their own becoming. The journey for the person who is trapped in the fearful, wounded, and compulsive need to be self-reliant is the journey of transforming that compulsion from a prison into a conscious choice. It is the work of healing the inner child who was never allowed to be helpless, of learning that it is safe to ask for help, and of finally arriving at a place where the choice to struggle is not a desperate defense, but a joyful and life-affirming act. And the journey for the rest of us, for the ones who have become so accustomed to the frictionless ease of the instant answer, for the ones whose first instinct in the face of any difficulty is to reach for the phone, is to have the immense courage to ask ourselves what we are losing. What profound and life-altering inner muscles are we allowing to atrophy? What magnificent and world-changing inner journeys are we aborting simply for the sake of a little bit of convenience? The person who likes to figure things out on their own has given us a great and terrible gift. They have shown us the possibility of a different kind of relationship with the world and with ourselves. A relationship that is not based on the passive consumption of answers, but on the active, courageous, and deeply satisfying creation of them. They have shown us that the ultimate form of intelligence is not to know all the answers, but to have the courage to live in the heart of the questions. And they have shown us that the ultimate purpose of life is not to arrive at a destination, but to have the courage to be fully, deeply, and transformatively present for the journey. They have reminded us that we are not just users of a world that has already been built. We are, if we have the courage to be, the builders of it. And the most important and most beautiful thing we can ever build is ourselves.